Welcome.
Hi, welcome back to First Saturday Science. My name is Tavya, and we're in the month of May, and we're going to be talking about the lithosphere. So the lithosphere talks about the different layers of the Earth, and so naturally we're going to talk a lot about soil. And we're going to do a few experiments this month, but this one right now we're going to talk about soil permeability. Soil permeability is sort of defined as the ability for a soil to take in water and how fast the water might travel through it, because not all soil is made the same. Some soils have a lot of clay, some have a lot of sand, some have a lot of rocks, and so those kinds of constituents are going to change the way that water is infiltrating those systems. So right here I have two samples. I have a sand sample and a rock sample. And you can see that even though we have about the same level of material in here, there's definitely like few more rocks than there are in grains of sand, right? And the way water will flow through them is going to be a little bit different. There's not a lot of room in the sand for the water to flow through, but there is a lot of room between the rocks for the water to flow through. And so if you think about it, water is going to flow really quickly through the rocks, much faster than it would through the sand. And so in this way, we can kind of tailor the soil or test soil samples to figure out what they're made out of, what the constituents are. And in that way, we're able to figure out what kind of permeability that soil sample would display. And those kinds of things are really important for water filtration, which we'll see this month. And then also for things like plants. You know, plants might prefer soil or not prefer soil, depending on how much that soil is able to hold in terms of water. So next we're gonna do a little bit of an experiment on soil permeability on a couple different samples. So excited to join you in the lab. Hi, welcome back to lab. My name is Tavya, and this is the month of May for First Saturday Science. For this experiment, we're gonna do soil permeability. And when you take a sample as a soil scientist of some soil that you're working on, this is our sample. You identify it. There's different types of soil, like sandy, loamy soil, for example. And if you can kind of look, you can kind of see like if there's little rocks or something in it, you can kind of take a guess. But a really good way for scientists to figure out what kind of permeability a soil sample has is by just putting water in it and seeing how fast the water goes through. And so in order to do that, you kind of have to have some controls or some idea of what each constituent compound might have as a soil permeability rating in general. And so we're going to test a couple items, and then at the end we're going to try to take a guess as to how much of each compound our sample soil might have. So for this experiment, we're going to test three different compounds. We're going to test some gravel, and we're going to test some sand, and we're going to test some clay. And these are all things that might be in your soil. And honestly, they probably are in your soil, even just in your yard, but they might be in varying concentrations or ratios. So first thing we're going to do is get our materials ready. I have a little spatula, which is great for scooping. And then I also have some filter papers, and we're gonna need 4 filter papers today. And then 4 flasks or cups if you're at home, and then 4 little funnels, some water, and then something to measure your water out in, just because in most science experiments we like to keep things controlled. So in each segment we're gonna add about 80 milliliters of water. The actual amount doesn't matter that much, just as long as it's the same amount each time. So if you're at home, you can use like a tablespoon or a quarter cup, things like that. And then we're gonna put our samples into the filter paper, into the filter, into the flask, and then we'll run an experiment after too as well. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take our filter papers and we're gonna fold them in half, like that, to make kind of like a half moon. And then we're gonna fold that in half again, make kind of like this ginkgo leaf shape. And then you see you've created all these layers here, right? And you're gonna take, it doesn't matter which one you choose, just as long as it's the top one or the bottom one. but we're gonna put our finger in one of the holes and then separate it so that we have a funnel shaped piece of paper. And we're gonna put one of those in each one of our funnels. Fold it in half, fold it in half, separate on one side, fold it in half, fold it in half, separate it. I like to squish it just so that it doesn't fold back on itself. Fold it in half, fold it in half, separate it, squish it a little bit, and then put it in. And now we're gonna put our samples into the filters. So we'll take a little bit of sand and do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We'll do 6 scoops. Maybe 7. 7 scoops right there. And then we're going to do the same for our clay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And now for our soil sample. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And for the gravel, we'll just add some gravel just because it doesn't really scoop that well. We'll just add a few rocks. Oops. That's good. So I don't know if you can see, but there's some gravel here. Our soil sample here. Our clay sample. And our sand sample. And now we're going to add a little bit of water to our samples. I'm going to put these just to the side. And remember, you want to add the same amount of water to each one. So for this one, I'm going to add about 80 milliliters to each one. So our gravel sample. You can see the water is trickling out pretty quick. And we'll let that one trickle. Measure out another 80 mils or whatever you chose for your measurement. And this one's the clay sample. It's starting to trickle out. It's very slow though. And this is actually a fun time to talk about what kind of funnel system this is. This is what's called a gravimetric funnel system. Gravimetric might sound a little bit familiar because it's got the same root of the word as gravity. So gravity is the force that's pulling the water down through the clay system or through the sand or the gravels or whichever sample you're talking about. There are other types of funnel systems that have like a vacuum suction, which might pull things out quickly that might not normally go through gravimetrically. We'll let that one trickle. Another 80 milliliters to the sand one. And you can see the difference just in here, right? This one's just kind of dripping out, and the funnel is still pretty full actually. And this one's going out pretty quickly in comparison to the clay, but definitely not as fast as the gravel one. So you can kind of see that the particle size of the material definitely has a big difference on the soil permeability. So for the last one, another 80 mils of water. And now I'm going to pour it through our soil sample. And actually, I selected a soil sample that was specially made for plants. So this is soil that was made specially for plants, that plants really like. And so a question that I have is, what do you think is in the soil? Do you think it's a lot of gravel? Do you think it's a lot of clay, a lot of sand? And then think about what kind of soil you would like if you were a plant, right? Would you like soil that runs water through very fast or very, very slow? And the answer is actually really interesting because different plants like different soil permeability levels. Some plants like a little bit of clay. Some plants don't like clay at all. Some plants like to be wet all the time, and some plants like to dry out for a little while, kind of like cactuses and succulents. They like to be really dry and then get a lot of water every once in a while. So you can still see our sample is done running through its water, and our clay, it's still full. The funnel's still full. It's not really going through very quickly. And so now you can measure, oh, I'll pull these back actually. If you put them close to each other, we can see that this one had about maybe like 80 milliliters of water go through for the gravel. And remember, we put 80 milliliters of water, right? And so we got about the same amount of water out as we had originally put in, meaning that the material itself didn't actually absorb very much of the water at all, if any. And then for the sand, we got maybe like 70 milliliters. So we lost a little bit of water in the sand. You can kind of tell that the sand is swollen. So it's got a lot of water trapped within it. And so you can see that it absorbs very little water compared to, say, the clay, which, well, the permeability is so low that we don't even have our full sample, so who knows how much is going to go through. But at this point, we have a little more than half of the water that we added. And then for our soil sample, it's about 75 milliliters of water that we got through. So yeah, thank you and have a great day.